This conference will now be recorded.
Great, thanks Megan, I appreciate that. So good afternoon everyone. I'd like to thank you for coming to the Macdonald-Richaud Planning District Community Visioning Workshop. This is just one component of the development plan review process, and I'll get into more details on that momentarily. But as you know, this is being prepared by WSP. So Megan has already introduced herself. So I'm Carrie Schultz. I'm a senior planner with WSP. And we also, on our team, we have Brad Muller, planner with WSP. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. I'm going to give a presentation just to provide some context on how we plan on doing this project. I will discuss the provincial planning framework, the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region Plan 2050, and the results of the background study. We'll just take a quick little break after that and then come back together for the visioning exercise and discussion. For the visioning exercise, we'll be using menti.com. So you'll need another device like your smartphone or something, or iPad or something like that to participate in that part. And then finally, if there are any questions at the end, we would be happy to answer them. So let's get started. To begin, here is a timeline of the project. So it started in December 2020. To begin, WSP conducted background research from December till April 2021, and then we held a workshop with the steering committee to review the background study. Stakeholder engagement begins this week, which is where we are now. So obviously we're doing the community visioning workshops, as well as we're going to engage with other key stakeholders such as government departments and local organizations. Once the public engagement and stakeholder engagements are complete for this portion of the project, WSP will complete a summary report and draft the development plan vision. Together with the background report and the information we obtain through stakeholder engagement, we will draft the development plan and associated maps. As part of this process, we conduct an informal provincial review, and shortly after we'll hold an open house, which may or may not be virtual. We don't know at this time. And then along with the open house, we will conduct additional stakeholder engagement, including provincial and public consultations and the steering committee. And again, after the open house, we will conduct an online survey. So all information gathered will inform the final draft of the development plan, which WSP will prepare for formal adoption early next year. So we still have a lot of work in front of us. I just want to highlight also some of the public engagement opportunities that we plan on having. So obviously today and next week are the community visioning workshops. There will also be an open house to present the draft development plan, and there will be 2 online surveys, one to be completed after this workshop and another to be conducted after the open house. And then finally, there's the public hearing that is held after first reading of the bylaw. So we really do hope to engage you throughout the process and look forward to hearing all of your comments. Okay, so I'll delve now into the provincial planning framework. So a planning district development plan must fit into the provincial planning framework. So this diagram shows the hierarchy of planning documents that feed into a development plan. So at the top are the provincial land use policies, or PLUPs as we commonly refer to them. Then there's the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region Plan 2050. And this plan applies to the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region, including Macdonald and Richaud. And although Plan 2050 is still in the draft stage, once adopted, all development plans in the Metropolitan Region must comply with it. And then we have the development plan itself, which provides land use policy direction for the planning district. And then the subsequent documents, such as the secondary plan, zoning bylaw, building bylaw, all fall below that. And we get into increasing detail as we go down the flowchart. Next slide, please. So what exactly are the PLUPs? Well, they're the provincial policies that provide the legislative framework for provincial and local land use planning in Manitoba, and they apply to the entire province and convey the province's interest in land use planning. So the PLUPs will generally guide us as we prepare this land use plan and making land use and development decisions. So the development plan must be generally consistent with the PLUPs. And there are 9 policy areas to consider. So this includes general development, settlement areas, agriculture, renewable resources, heritage and recreation, water, infrastructure, transportation, mineral resources, and the capital region. So as I mentioned earlier, Plan 2050 applies to the Winnipeg metropolitan area, which is comprised of 18 municipalities, including the arm of Macdonald and the arm of Rougeau. In 2019, the province mandated that the WMR develop a strategy to coordinate land use and servicing in the region. So essentially, the goal of this plan is to provide a long-term vision to guide land use and development in the metropolitan region. And all development plans within the WMR must be consistent with Plan 2050. So this is partly the reason why the planning district has decided to review the development plan now. So basically that when the development plan is adopted, it will comply with Plan 2050 right away when that plan is adopted. So the two processes are going on concurrently, but this is a very proactive approach that the planning district is taking. All right, so Plan 2050 includes 5 policy areas. So basically these policy areas have been developed to support sustainable development and enhance the economic competitiveness in the region. These 5 policy areas include integrated communities and infrastructure, one environment, investment and employment, resource management, and collaborative governance. So how does this impact the planning district? Well, there's a couple of things in Plan 2050 that we will need to consider as we review this development plan. So first of all, Plan 2050 requires that the planning district achieve density minimums for areas designated as rural centers and settlements. So this includes Oak Bluff, LaSalle, Ile-des-Chênes, Sanford, Saint-Agathe, Saint-Adolphe, and Grand Point. So it's also important to note that most of these communities are already meeting the minimum densities being established. And the other component that would affect this development plan is that Plan 2050 also requires no net gain in industrial land designations, or the way it's termed in the current development plan, it's enterprise centers. So no net gain in enterprise center land designations. So I've reviewed the PLUPs now in Plan 2050. So let's get into a little bit more detail about what is a development plan, what they are, and what we hope to achieve. So a development plan will help to ensure the compatibility of neighboring land uses, the appropriate mix and amount of development. A plan will also help with the effective management of natural resources and the preservation of heritage resources. The development plan also helps to ensure the cost-effective and timely delivery of infrastructure services and the protection of surface and groundwater. And the plan also helps to ensure sustainable economic and community growth. So as part of their current policies in the development plan, Macdonald Rougeau must review their plan periodically to make sure that it is current and up to date. The current development plan actually has 8 land use designations. So as shown on this map, the largest area, which is kind of the pale yellow, that's the green agricultural policy area. And the purpose of this designation is to protect prime agricultural land from encroachment and fragmentation. The environmental policy area, which is shown in green, its purpose is to protect the natural environment and to ensure that all urban centers continue to be adequately protected from flooding. And as you can see, this is mostly just along the riparian areas. The urban center policy area includes the communities of Starbuck, Oak Bluff, Sanford, LaSalle, Saint-Adolphe, Ile-des-Chênes, and Saint-Agathe. This means that these urban centers have been identified as the planning district's principal growth areas, characterized by higher levels of municipal infrastructure, land use diversity, and community services. And then next we have the rural center policy area. So this designation includes the communities of Domaine, Brunkild, Grand Point, and the area across from Ile-des-Chênes. These areas are intended to provide choice to residents who prefer to live in a more rural setting and typically with larger lots. And then we also have the enterprise center policy areas, which are a little bit hard to see on this map, but it's kind of a pinky color or a light purple. These enterprise centers are the planning district's major commercial and industrial areas. So this includes the McGillivray Boulevard area, Oak Bluff, St. Agathe, and Grand Point. And then there's also hold policy areas. So the hold policy areas of urban centers, rural centers, and enterprise centers are intended to direct their growth and to ensure that enough lands are retained to provide adequate supplies of serviceable land for expansion of these centers. So now I'm going to jump into the background report. So prior to any development plan being prepared, the first step is for the project team to compile a comprehensive background report on the planning district. So the background report provides a summary of existing conditions in the area, including land use, the natural environment, infrastructure, transportation, population and demographics, and community services and facilities. So the following slides are just going to be some selected highlights. Land cover. So as you probably noticed in a couple slides ago with the land use designations, most of the planning district is covered by agricultural lands, which actually comprise 85% of the area. And then next we have the natural areas, which are shown again in green. And these are confined primarily to the riparian areas along the streams and rivers. The natural areas represent a small percentage of the overall land cover in the planning district, and preservation of these areas is important for providing habitat for wildlife and aids in the protection of water quality. And then you also have the other land uses such as the urban land uses as well. So next slide, please. So drainage within the area. The planning district is drained by a hierarchy of interconnecting watercourses, including the LaSalle, Seine, Morris, Rat, Marsh, and Red Rivers, as shown on this map. So the highest order watercourses are the Red River and Seine River, which flow north through Richaud, and the LaSalle River, which flows east through McDonald. These water systems are important in controlling water flow, and at times they can also pose a serious flood risk to the settlement centers. So as noted earlier, a significant portion of the planning district is comprised of agricultural land. So this map actually illustrates the soil classifications, and as you can see, it is predominantly class 2 and class 3 soils, which are the two different shades of green there. So these are considered prime agricultural lands, and according to the PLUPS, prime agricultural lands must be identified and designated as agriculture in a development plan. So something else that we need to consider in current days is climate change and resilience. And the impacts of climate change and severe weather are increasingly affecting Manitoba communities. So what does this actually mean for McDonald Richaud? Well, you can see the list here. The average temperature is expected to increase in every season. Heat wave events will be longer and more frequent. Precipitation is expected to increase, especially in spring, fall, and winter. However, it's projected to decrease in the summer months. Precipitation events are also expected to become more intense and frequent, essentially a higher volume of rain in shorter periods of time. The growing season will also become longer as Manitoba winters become shorter. Droughts are expected to occur more frequently with the warmer temperatures and decreased summer precipitation. And flooding events are expected to become more frequent and more intense, which for this area is something that we definitely need to keep in mind. Population and employment. In 2020, the planning district's overall population was just under 16,000, with McDonald accounting for about 8,300 residents and Richaud accounting for about 7,700 residents. In a baseline scenario, the population of the planning district is expected to increase to 28,900 by 2050. And using a high growth projection, the population may increase to over 31,000 residents. So we expect the population to almost double within the next 30 years. As such, new employment opportunities are also expected to increase in relation to the increase in population. Using the baseline scenario, the planning district will create 8,100 new employment opportunities by 2050, or 8,700 with the high growth scenario. Whoops. Sorry about that. All right, next slide. So population forecasts play a key role in planning for future housing demand. So if we use the high growth scenario, it is estimated that the arm of McDonald will require over 5,000 new dwellings by 2050, and that the arm of Richaud will require almost 6,000 new dwelling units for the same time period. So it's quite substantial. The transportation network. So as you all know, there's an extensive highway network that runs throughout the planning district. So this map identifies all provincial highways, which are classified as expressways, arterials, or collectors. The expressways include PTH 100, PTH 75, and PTH 59. The primary arterials are PTHs 2 and 3, and PR 332 is a secondary arterial. And then the remaining highways are considered collectors. And then lastly, active transportation. The Crow Wing Trail, highlighted in yellow, runs south through the arm of Richaud from Winnipeg. The trail follows a combination of trails and roadways running through St. Adolphe and continuing south to Niverville. Additionally, most of the urban centers have a variety of recreational paths. So that presents a summary of the provincial planning framework and the background study. Are there any questions so far? You can either unmute yourselves to ask, or you can type it in the chat feature if you prefer. Okay, doesn't sound like we have any questions. All right. So you can just skip this slide, Brad. All right, thank you. So the next part of today's presentation is the visioning workshop component. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the part where we'll be using the program called Menti. So basically, we just want to set some ground rules and instructions. We want to let everyone have a chance to speak. We want to respect all group members' opinions and discussion points. And we ask that you please respect the time frame provided for each task. So just in a nutshell, basically the purpose of this next part is to develop a vision for the planning district and identify any land use issues and opportunities within the planning district. So if you have another device such as a smartphone, you'll be able to answer all the questions on the smartphone. Next slide, please. So we'll just take a few minutes here. But if you can use your phone or another device, please go to www.menti.com. And then once you get to that website, please enter the code 95459821. So we'll just give everybody a few minutes.
Yeah, just so everybody knows too, you can just do it like in your regular computer browser as well. But you just might have to flip back and forth between the results and the questions. So
yeah, so really what Menti does, it allows us to ask questions and get responses in real time. So it's kind of a little nifty little program to gauge everybody's responses, like I said, in real time. I'll just wait one more minute to ensure that everybody's ready.
Yeah, this looks good. We have some results coming in already. So people are getting
you guys are quick.
yeah, this is a good warm-up question because it's easy. What community do you live in? So
And if you miss the code, it's there up on the top of the screen.
yeah, thanks, Brad. So yeah, 95459821. Okay, so lots from Oak Bluff and LaSalle, and then looks like sort of one each from St. Adolphe, Ile-des-Chênes, Starbuck. So yeah, that's great. This helps us also as we compile all the feedback from all of you guys. It helps us also sort of understand, you know, what geographic locations that feedback is coming from. So.
All right, we'll just wait maybe half a minute. Oh, okay. Next question. Oh, you missed one, I think. Yes, there we go. So how long have you lived in your community? Just select the appropriate option. All right, so lots of people have moved there recently.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of people have been in their communities for quite some time.
Okay, yeah,
that's
that's good. Yeah, lots of 1 to 5 years. So it's nice to see, yeah, those people engaged, yeah, in planning for your community moving forward.
all right. Great. We could probably move on to the next question now. So the next couple slides are just meant to gauge your thoughts and perspectives on the planning district. So this will generate a word cloud, and what we're looking for is your perception of what makes Macdonald-Richaud unique. And what you can do is you can submit up to 3 entries if you like.
So this, we're looking for a word, maybe it's, you know, something you love about your community, whether that would be a physical place or stuff like these answers coming in, that it's rural, that it's peaceful, that it's quiet. And again, this just helps us know what everybody values about the community and helps us inform what the vision and development plan policies will be over time. So yeah, some really nice results coming in here. Yeah, people like the Friendship Trail, the fact that there's you know, options for so-called bedroom communities. It's quiet, it's safe. Lots of young people and probably young families. Close to the U.S. border is one, so that's good. A nice growing community. The rivers. So I always like this activity and these types of online engagements. It just gives, yeah, a very nice sense of what people think in sort of just a quick in a quick way. So.
All right, maybe we'll move on to the next question. So the next question is similar, but what we're asking you here is to use keywords to describe what you think Macdonald-Richaud should look like in the next 20 years or so. I guess, you know, one thing to consider is maybe housing. Do you expect there to be maybe more diverse housing mix, or more of a housing mix in terms of types, like semi-detached or townhomes, or maybe more affordable homes? Is there anything that's maybe not being, is there a recreational opportunity that perhaps isn't being utilized to its best advantage?
So when we use this in part for sort of some public input into what we will draft as the vision to guide the development plan policy. So on Mentimeter, you could enter, different ideas. There's sort of 3 options. You don't just have to put in one. So it looks like we have quite a few coming in here, a few on amenities or sort of more amenities, more retail. So that would speak to, opening up or encouraging opportunities for commercial and potentially some industrial development, more services, business growth, definitely inherently connected to those employment or enterprise center land use designations, certainly planned green space and trail networks. The development plan can provide high level direction on those things. I think rural is maybe the biggest word there because we're probably getting multiple multiple responses with respect to that. And I think that that's something for sure that, will be reflected as it is now in the development plan is the huge sort of agricultural base and agricultural nature of the planning district. So yeah, we're getting so many here, they're hard to see. But yeah, I do see, preserved agricultural area, diverse housing inventory, a library, more parks. Yeah, these are all really great. Thank you so much.
Maybe we'll just give another 30 seconds or so in case if people are entering multiple answers.
People have lots of ideas on this one, it seems like.
Yeah, it seems like people want the rural character to be preserved. But of course you want amenities as well, and that makes actual perfect sense.
Yeah. And sort of, that leads me to think about sort of focusing growth in, in a lot of those existing communities, for example, where it makes sense to provide those services, but just like that the rural sort of nature of those communities is still preserved as well.
Okay. Let's move into some questions about land use. So again, there's lots of overlap between these questions, so if they seem repetitive, I'm sorry. But the next question is, what are current land use opportunities in Macdonald-Richaud? So it would be very similar to this question, like what are, whoops.
Oh, I think Brad was maybe having an issue with forwarding the slide there, so maybe he's just unsharing and we'll reshare in one moment.
Okay, let's just wait a moment for Brad to catch up here. It was going very smoothly, so
yeah,
not surprising.
Okay, I see my slide got updated on Mentimeter, so I'm sure, it's just a moment here. There we go.
Okay, so what are the current land use opportunities in Macdonald-Richaud? Perhaps what are some things that you think could be done but haven't been done yet?
So this we're probably, looking at high level opportunities. Again, I think Carrie spoke to, increasing housing diversity, for example, like that would be, an opportunity that we could look at encouraging for within the development plan. So some comments coming here on an arena. So speaking to recreational type opportunities, industrial and commercial closer to Winnipeg. So definitely there's the McGillivray sort of enterprise center policy area where there's been significant development, industrial and commercial development in Macdonald, just right adjacent to the city as well. Some local grocery stores. So again, speaking to encouraging those types of commercial uses, particularly probably in some of those existing communities. Perimeter improvements implemented. So yes, there's definitely, we also worked on the South Perimeter planning study for Manitoba infrastructure, and I worked on some of the engagement for that. So I definitely, a lot of that information is being heard for sure in terms of perimeter improvements. So yeah, a ton of comments here. More parks, industrial land brings in employment and residents for sure. Variety of housing types and price ranges, looking to support that complete community aspect. Sounds like we might have another planner in the bunch using the term complete communities. Maintaining agricultural land base and better use and more public access to the rivers, and maybe in LaSalle in particular, I think that is saying expanded retail, supporting industries. Okay, and so interesting other comments as well. So in Oak Bluff, we have one comment that, if someone's not interested necessarily in diverse housing stock, they moved there because people own their own homes, and I believe the vast majority of them there are probably single unit homes as well. So certainly a valid comment. Too many condos and rentals and no green space, sidewalks, and important infrastructure to support it. So these are all really, really great comments.
All right. So the next question is asking you the opposite. What are the current land use issues in Macdonald-Rousseau?
So I think we do anticipate there's a little bit of overlap between sort of the last question and this one, but I think often we get, one or two sort of extra things when we ask these types of questions that it's worthwhile. So again, sort of the difference in speaking about some of the issues, and like I said, some of those came through in the previous one, but definitely infrastructure we're hearing too. I'm sort of curious also, when we refer to infrastructure, it's helpful to us. Are you talking about transportation? Are you talking about linear infrastructure like water and wastewater? That's sort of helpful to know, and maybe we can have more of a conversation about that in the question and answer period. Okay, so don't subdivide agricultural land for housing. So yeah, that definitely speaks to protection of agricultural amenities for sure. So we're hearing too that there is a lack of housing diversity. So it's interesting too, and this is, not unusual what we hear from different people, right? Some people say they aren't looking for housing diversity. That's why they move to a certain place. And, they like the fact that everybody owns their home, and it's, a sort of cohesive and consistent type development in terms of single unit dwellings, for example. And then others are looking for that housing diversity and, increasing affordability and opportunities for people to own their own homes. Housing for seniors and focus new housing on towns.
Yeah, I feel like there's a number of land use planners in the audience today. I find myself agreeing with a lot of these comments. This is really great.
Yeah. So even just on the focus new housing on towns, like as an example, that's one of the policy directions in the draft Plan 2050, which is the Winnipeg Metro Region Plan. It's making sure new housing is directed to those existing communities where those services, amenities, and infrastructure exist, and it makes more sense to expand them there, for example, as opposed to subdividing agricultural land for either rural residential or residential uses. I think housing for seniors as well, I see that twice here. That also generally speaks to policies that we can have on affordability and diversity of housing stock, and providing options for people to age in place in those existing communities.
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So this one is just asking you to rank the importance of planning for five different areas. So just rank them in order of importance to you. So the first one is protection of natural environment and agricultural uses. The second is variety of housing choices, then parks and open spaces, roads and infrastructure, and industrial and commercial lands. So just rank them from first to fifth place, and we'll see which planning issue or ends up in the lead.
So it should be fairly straightforward on, oh, here we go. It was like maybe
Okay.
delayed there a little bit or something.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Now we're getting some.
All right, and I think this just reiterates some of the previous comments on the previous slides about the importance of roads and infrastructure and how they play an integral role in your community.
I like how as numbers come in, they like shift and change, moving up and down the list. So, okay, but definitely roads and infrastructure is first so far. Oh, protection of natural environment and ag uses.
All right, we have a race.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I mean we work on a lot of land use plans throughout rural municipalities, sort of close to Winnipeg and elsewhere in Manitoba, and you know, not all municipalities, even if they are an agricultural municipality, you know, we don't always get feedback that, you know, that sort of natural environment and agricultural uses are like a major concern. Again, that is direction from the province, obviously retaining and preserving that agricultural use as that amenity and economic resource that it represents. But it is really nice to see then, you know, when the general public is also reflecting that. And because that's certainly not always the case. So that's nice to see here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting outcome.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. So the next couple of slides are asking about residential growth. So the first one is, where should residential growth be accommodated in Macdonald? And we've listed the main settlement centers of LaSalle, Oak Bluff, Sanford, Starbuck, Brunkild, and Domain, or you may enter another option. And you have the option of selecting up to 3 locations. So select your best 3, you think.
Yeah, where it's tricky, we're asking them to prioritize.
We are.
So yeah, these are all the communities within Macdonald that are essentially already designated in the existing development plan as those settlement areas. And so just looking for, you know, some information. So Cindy, I see, why is my community not even listed here? Where do you live?
If you live in Richaud, that's the next slide.
Yeah.
So it was just too many to list on one slide, so I broke it down by municipality.
So lots to Oak Bluff, which I would have expected, LaSalle as well. So yeah, it's interesting, sort of the scale or response is, you know, generally similar to probably the size and scale of those individual communities. So.
And also, I have a quick question for the people that selected other. Would you be able to type in the chat which communities you're referring to?
Yeah, or unmute yourself. Like, it's interesting to us, you know, if there are other, like what that might be. Yeah, so Cindy,
okay.
if you're in Ile-des-Chênes, it's on the next slide, because this is the slide for the arm of Macdonald, and we do have a slide for Richaud on the next one. So just because the planning district is representative of the 2 municipalities. So Ryan's just asking what this question means. We're just looking for some feedback on where residential growth should be accommodated in Macdonald. So already it's being directed in the existing development plan to these existing communities, and essentially this just helps us understand if you know, the general public and people responding to this, you know, are generally, you know, agreeing with where you know, the fact that residential growth is being directed to those areas. We're not going to be taking this and say, you know, 75% of development has to be, you know, directed to Oak Bluff. That's not the intent of this. So I don't know if that answers your question, Ryan.
All right, we can jump to the next slide, and then this is where essentially the same question, but now we're looking at the RM of Richaud. So again, we've listed the main settlement centers such as St. Adolphe, St. Agathe, Ile-des-Chênes, and Grand Point. Again, you may also select other as an option. And like the previous question, you have the option of selecting up to 3 locations.
So I assume some of the others we might be getting is maybe more either new or existing, maybe more like rural residential sort of type areas. I'm assuming sort of that where some of the other responses are coming in, but if anybody who's responding wants to make a particular comment on that, we'd certainly love to hear it. You can either send us a note in the chat through GoToMeeting or just unmute yourself and make a comment. Okay, so lots for Ile-des-Chênes here. Then St. Adolphe and then St. Agathe and Grand Point are tied. But yeah, just as I mentioned to Ryan, who had asked a question before, we're not taking this information and, sort of proportioning growth to these communities in any way. It's just to provide us with some input, but that wouldn't be the result of this. The development plan would not be as prescriptive as that.
Okay, great. Thanks for your responses. So the last 2 slides are asking about industrial development. So again, we split it into a question on Macdonald, and then the next one will be for Richaud. But basically, of the existing areas for industrial development in Macdonald, what area do you feel should be prioritized? And again, for this one, you may select up to 2 locations if you like. So there's Oak Bluff, McGillivray Boulevard, Sanford, Starbuck, and again, other in case if we missed something.
So I'll also just pick up on something that Carrie mentioned as part of the WMR Plan 2050 at the beginning of the presentation. So part of the outcome in that plan is just draft. It hasn't been approved by the province yet, but again, we're trying to sort of move through the process concurrently. So we're trying to, we're sort of assuming it'll be approved and trying to work with that existing policy direction. And one of those directions is that no net new employment lands would be identified within the region. And that is because based on the land use analysis that was completed for that plan, overall, there's 4 times too much employment lands designated within the Winnipeg metro region than what is projected to be needed until 2050. And so the policy direction to not identify any additional employment lands is to sort of like over time be able to right size the employment lands that are available. But this development plan review gives us the opportunity to maybe sort of analyze that a little bit more. And it's, for me right now, it's more about, are the existing areas that have been designated for industrial development in the planning district in the right places? So I think we do have the opportunity right now to maybe shift some of that, some of those designations around a little bit, depending on existing development rates. And definitely, I think one of those opportunities, might be, looking at that McGillivray Boulevard industrial park, as well as Oak Bluff. It sounds like there's significant interest in prioritizing those areas. So this is great.
Okay, and then the last slide, same question except for the RM of Richaud. Of the existing areas for industrial development in Richaud, what area should be prioritized? And again, you may select up to 2 locations. So the options here are the area that's adjacent to St. Adolphe, St. Agathe, Ile-des-Chênes, Grand Point, or other.
So again, each of these representing existing employment designations within Richaud. I do have a comment just that was sent to the organizers, just a comment that I wanted to let everybody know that many younger people, it says, want to buy homes in Ile-des-Shane, and there are very few. So no specific accommodations for seniors and no homes for youth to stay in the community. So that's some really great feedback as well that I think, you know, is consistent with what we heard earlier on with some of these questions as well for diversity of housing and affordability of housing.
And again, I noticed that a couple of people have selected other. If you can just maybe, unmute yourself and tell us what this other place is, or just type it into the chat. We'd really appreciate that, if possible.
Okay, so it looks like the feedback here, people are, sort of that enterprise center policy designation that exists that's adjacent to St. Adolphe is being prioritized by people here today, and but also areas in St. Agathe and Ile-des-Shane as well. So nobody here today is prioritizing the industrial area in Grand Point.
Okay, well, I think that concludes the visioning session. That's all the questions that we have on Menti. So I'm just going to jump back over to the PowerPoint presentation just to sum things up. But this is also a great opportunity. If you have any questions or comments, we'd be happy to try to answer them now. Okay, if you could just go to the next slide, Brad. Whoops. All right. Oh, there is one more comment. Again, I appreciate any comments that we receive. So I'm just going to read it out so that everybody has the benefit of hearing. So it is sad that our youth and seniors leave their communities in search of homes that match their needs, single family homes for young families, and accessible and affordable housing for seniors. So great, I really appreciate the extra comments.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I will just say, sort of related to Cindy's comment there, that, you know, one of the main things we can look at, okay, she's saying that was directly for Ile-des-Shane that she's commenting on. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, can in part be directed, you know, in the development plan is looking at some smaller lot widths, for example, right? So it really looks at, you know, you can still have those single unit dwellings, for example, but on smaller lots, you know, there might be a little bit smaller homes, but they are more affordable for people who are maybe looking to get into a single family home, you know, into that market. So thanks for that feedback there.
Great. Okay, so that basically concludes everything. I just want to point out that we do have an online survey that you can access through this link shown here, or use the QR code. We can also email it to you directly since we do have your email addresses. So I just want to go through kind of some of the next steps. So the next step really is the online, it's kind of an exit survey basically, and we will leave that open for a few weeks to gather any additional comments. And during that same period of time, we're actually going to be engaging with other key stakeholders like government departments, the municipal councils, local organizations and developers to get their perspectives as well. And then after the stakeholder engagement is complete, we will compile the results and basically draft a summary report of what we heard. Sorry, I just noticed there's a question here. When this process is finished, what do you think the plan will look like? Is it to be specific to certain areas or more of a general nature? So that's a good question. So the development plan is kind of the overarching policy document that will apply to the entire planning district. So the policies are a bit higher level, but we will, like in the current document where we already have certain areas designated as urban centers, for example, we'll have policies directly related to those urban centers or policies directly related to the enterprise centers, so on and so forth. So it's kind of a mix. So overall, I'd say it's general, but there will be specific policies applying to urban centers and the enterprise centers and the like. As far as what the plan will actually look like, I'm not entirely certain. We still have to go through our process of stakeholder consultation and see where that leads us as well. And maybe Megan has something more to add.
Yeah, I think all I was going to say is, Jeff, if you want to look at the existing development plan, again, it won't necessarily be, the same as that, obviously, because we're updating it and reviewing it, but that, sort of level of policy direction would be consistent between what the existing one is and what we would be looking to update for the new one.
Yeah, and then when you get into the zoning bylaw, that's where you get into more specifics and more numbers and technical requirements of development. So the development plan does tend to be a bit more general.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that basically concludes everything. If you think of something, please feel free to contact me. I've got my contact information on the next slide. You can contact me by email or by phone, either or. And I just really want to.
Carrie, was it November in our schedule that the open house would be that we'd be presenting the draft plan?
I'd have to go back to that timeline slide. It's probably the second or third slide, if maybe Brad can go back.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to give people an idea of sort of when they can hear from us again, so to speak. So
yeah,
so open houses we have sort of in November, and so sort of between now and then we'll be preparing the draft plan and working with both councils of the municipalities within the planning district on refining that, and we'll be presenting the policy drafts at open houses. Hopefully they can be in person in November, and accepting feedback on those from you as well. So now that we have your information when you registered for this, I believe Shannon sent you guys a link, and so we have your email. We'll make sure in addition to sending out the postcards and newspaper advertisements in terms of how we advertise today, that we'll get in touch with you individually as well for those sessions. And I think there's also an option to leave your contact information on the survey too.
Yeah, so I'd just like to really thank everyone for participating and giving us an hour of your time. Your comments are very helpful. And there's a question here, are the slides available afterwards? Yeah, we can make sure that we post the slideshow on the municipal websites. And yeah, so that will take a few days, I believe, but we can definitely do that.
Yeah, we can post even like a recording of this presentation as well. So, and then maybe even a PDF just of the individual slides if people want to, want to view it at their convenience. So.
Yeah, so we really appreciate you taking the time to help us out. Your feedback is valuable. And there will also be, as Megan mentioned at the very beginning, there's another session on June 9th in the evening from 6 to 7 p.m. And it will be the exact same thing. So don't feel the need to attend. But if you know
I do see a few people who registered for both. So just so you know,
yeah,
you're not missing anything if you don't attend next week.
Yeah, so it'll be the exact same presentation, but maybe if you know someone who would like to participate, maybe just let them know that next week we're doing it all over again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, ladies.
Great, thank you.